It was supposed to be a simple visit, a brief stay, but now, looking back, I could pinpoint the exact moment everything started to go wrong. I stood at the entrance of our luxurious penthouse, feeling the weight of the marble floors beneath my feet. The world outside was bustling, endless, busy, alive, but here, in this space, it felt suffocating. It was supposed to be our home, a sanctuary. My husband, Ethan, had worked tirelessly to build this empire. He was the CEO of a tech company that was on the verge of a revolution. We had it all: wealth, power, success. But there was something else I couldn't ignore. I still remembered the day my sister, Lily, arrived to stay with us for a while. Her marriage had fallen apart, and I had offered her a place to stay. It was meant to be temporary, an escape for her, a relief for me. It wasn't long before I started noticing subtle things that didn't sit right with me. Lily was always so eager to be near Ethan, a little too eager. I chalked it up to her need for comfort after the end of her marriage. She was always asking for his advice on business matters. Even though she had no real interest in the industry, she laughed at his jokes a little too much, lingered a little too long after every conversation. At first, I dismissed it. She was my sister, after all. But over time, I began to feel an unease that gnawed at me. It wasn't until that night that everything changed. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when I overheard a conversation in the living room. Ethan was speaking in low tones, but his voice was unmistakable. "I told you, Lily, we can't keep doing this. It's getting too risky." My stomach churned. I froze, unsure of whether I should step into the room or pretend I hadn't heard. But Lily's response made me stay. "You think I care about risk, Ethan? You know what I want, and I'll get it. You promised me, remember?" There it was. A chill ran down my spine. I had never heard her speak like that, so cold, so calculating. Ethan sighed, clearly trying to calm her down, but his words only raised more questions. "I'll handle it, just like we discussed, but you need to trust me, okay? Trust me, like you always have." Trust, the word echoed in my mind, but it felt hollow now. I knew something wasn't right, but what was it? Was it more than just my imagination? Was there something more between them than the bond of family? I waited until they finished talking, then went to bed early, pretending to sleep. My mind raced, my heart pounding in my chest. Could I really confront them about this? Or was I just being paranoid? The next morning, I found Ethan in the study, his face hidden behind a pile of reports. He barely noticed me come in. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Morning, babe, you sleep well?" he asked, not looking up from his work. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been haunting me. "Is there something going on between you and Lily?" His pen froze in midair. For a split second, I could see the tiniest flicker of panic in his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by his usual confident demeanor. "No, of course not. What makes you think that?" he replied, his voice smooth, but I noticed the tension in his shoulders. "I just overheard you two talking last night, about trust and promises." It didn't sound like a normal conversation between family members. Ethan closed the folder in front of him and turned to face me. His expression softened, but there was something off about it. "Look, Lily's going through a tough time. I'm just trying to help her. You know how I am with family." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than he was letting on. His words didn't match the fear in his eyes, and the fact that he had brushed it off so easily only made me more suspicious. Days turned into weeks, and despite Ethan's assurances, the feeling in the pit of my stomach didn't go away. It intensified. The odd behavior, the late nights at the office, the phone calls that were always too hushed when I was nearby. It was too much to ignore. But what troubled me more was Lily's coldness. She had always been close to me, a confidant, a friend. Now, I hardly recognized her. She would barely make eye contact, her smile strained, her presence too controlled. It wasn't until I overheard another conversation between them that I knew something was terribly wrong. I had come home early from a meeting, hoping to surprise Ethan, but instead, I found him and Lily talking in his office. This time, their voices were raised, and I could hear the unmistakable tension. My heart skipped a beat. "Do you really think this is going to work, Ethan? You promised me we'd go all the way. I've done everything you asked, and I told you to trust me." Ethan's voice was sharp. "Everything's in place. You just need to keep quiet for now. Do you understand? Or what?" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper, but I could hear the menace in her words. "You'll throw me under the bus? After everything we've done together?" I could feel the blood drain from my face. What had they done together? I stepped into the room, unable to stay hidden any longer. They both turned to face me, but neither looked surprised. Ethan's face paled, and Lily's lips curled into a tight, almost mocking smile. Is there something you want to tell me? I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Ethan stood up quickly, his expression shifting to that of a man trying to regain control. I can explain, he started, but the words didn't come out with his usual confidence. This time, his voice wavered. Lily, on the other hand, didn't even bother to mask her contempt. She stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with something darker than I'd ever seen before. You're too late, she said, her tone cold, deliberate. There's nothing left to explain. A flood of emotion surged through me, anger, confusion, betrayal, but as the seconds passed, it all started to make sense. It wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. I looked at Ethan. What is she talking about? I demanded. Ethan hesitated, the silence stretched. He glanced at Lily, then back at me, and finally, he seemed to break. Fine, he said, his voice low. It wasn't just about family, it never was. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Lily crossed her arms, her eyes locked on me. Ethan and I have been working together. We've been working on you. What? I whispered, barely able to breathe. The company, she continued. Ethan had been planning to sell it from the inside out, but he needed someone to help him bring it down. Someone who would take the fall. Someone who could take over the reins once it was destroyed. You were always the golden girl, weren't you? Perfect wife. Perfect CEO's partner. Too perfect. Ethan's face twisted in regret, but his eyes were hard. We were going to destroy everything you worked for, just like you've always wanted to, and then we would take over the company, together. I couldn't believe it. The shock left me paralyzed for a moment. All the sleepless nights, the constant wondering, the tension, I had been blind to it all. They had been plotting behind my back, using me as a pawn in their game for control. But why? Why my company? I asked, the words barely forming. Lily's lips curled into a smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Because you were the key, we knew you'd never see it coming. And now, it's too late. I felt a wave of coldness wash over me, but something in me snapped. I was done being the pawn. They were going to regret underestimating me. You thought you had everything planned, I said, my voice steady, but you didn't count on me. You didn't count on me knowing your next move. Ethan looked at me, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I smiled, a dark, knowing smile that didn't belong to me. You see, I knew you weren't as clever as you thought. The moment you started distancing yourself, I started digging. And then I hired someone who would be loyal to me. Ethan's face shifted. You hired a private investigator? I nodded. Not just any investigator. Someone who had access to your financials, to your business dealings, to every conversation you thought you had in secret. The realization hit him like a slap. His eyes widened. And you never thought that I would know about the offshore accounts, the shady deals, the hidden transactions. I walked slowly around the room, my hands now steady, my voice gaining strength. The investigator already flagged the transfers to Lily's account. The deals you two made, deals that I would have never agreed to. Lily looked at Ethan, her face draining of color. You told her? She hissed. I ignored her and turned back to Ethan. I also found the messages, those trust talks you had, Ethan, the ones about betrayal and going all the way. I had already sent everything to the board of directors, including the full financial records and your involvement with Lily. Ethan's face darkened as the weight of my words sank in. And there's one more thing, I added, walking up to him. You never thought to look under your nose. You thought I'd just fold. But I had one final move. I've already secured the company's future. The deal's been signed. The color drained from his face completely. What did you do? I didn't smile. I sold your empire, Ethan. I sold it to someone who's far more capable of running it. You and Lily, both of you, are out. I turned and walked out of the office, leaving the two of them standing in the midst of their shattered plans. As I left the penthouse, a sense of calm settled over me. My revenge wasn't just sweet, it was the ultimate power move. Weeks passed, and the dust finally settled. Ethan and Lily's plan had crumbled under the weight of their own greed. The company, once under Ethan's control, now had new leadership, someone who valued integrity, loyalty, and vision. I had reclaimed my strength and took the reins of my own life, my future. Ethan, now a shadow of his former self, was left to deal with the fallout. Lily, having lost everything, had no one to turn to. But as for me, I had everything I needed, the company I had built, my dignity, and the strength to move forward. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't in destruction, it's in rising above and watching your enemies fall.